Angola, officially the Republic of Angola, is a country in southern Africa bordered by Namibia on the south, the Democratic Republic of the Congo on the north, and Zambia on the east. Its west coast is on the Atlantic Ocean and Luanda is its capital city. The exclave province of Cabinda has borders with the Republic of the Congo and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Portuguese were present in some mostly coastal points of the territory of what is now Angola, from the 16th to the 19th century, interacting in diverse ways with the peoples who lived there. In the 19th century, they slowly and hesitantly began to establish themselves in the interior. Angola as a Portuguese colony encompassing the present territory was not established before the end of the 19th century, and effective occupation, as required by the Berlin Conference, was achieved only by the 1920s after the Mbunda resistance and abduction of their king, Mbandu on Lyondthzi Kapova. Independence was achieved in 1975, after a protracted liberation war. After independence, Angola was the scene of an intense civil war from 1975 to 2002. Despite the civil war, areas such as Baixa de Cassanje continue a lineage of kings which have included the former King Kambamba Kulaxingo and current King Dianhenga Aspirante Mjinji Kulaxingo. The country has vast mineral and petroleum reserves, and its economy has on average grown at a double-digit pace since the 1990s, especially since the end of the Civil War. In spite of this, standards of living remain low for the majority of the population, and life expectancy and infant mortality rates in Angola are among the worst in the world. Angola is considered to be economically disparate, with the majority of the nation's wealth concentrated in a disproportionately small sector of the population. Angola is a member state of the African Union, the Community of Portuguese-language countries, the Latin Union and the Southern African Development Community. Etymology: the name Angola comes from the Portuguese colonial name Reino de Angola, appearing as early as Dias de Neves' 1571 charter. The toponym was derived by the Portuguese from the title ʁɡoʊlə held by the kings of Ndongo. Ndongo was a kingdom in the highlands, between the Kwanza and Lukala rivers, nominally tributary to the King of Congo but which was seeking greater independence during the 16th century. History. Early migrations and political units. Khois and hunter-gatherers are the earliest known modern human inhabitants of the area. They were largely absorbed and/or replaced by Bantu peoples during the Bantu migrations, though small numbers remain in parts of southern Angola to the present day. The Bantu came from the north, probably from somewhere near the present-day Republic of Cameroon and Sudan. The establishment of the Bantu took many centuries and gave rise to various groups who took on different ethnic characteristics. During this time, the Bantu established a number of political units in most parts of what today is Angola. The best known of these is the Kingdom of the Congo that had its center in the northwest of contemporary Angola, but included important regions in the west of present-day Democratic Republic of the Congo and Republic of Congo, and in southern Gabon. It established trade routes with other trading cities and civilizations up and down the coast of southwestern and West Africa and even with the Great Zimbabwe Mutapa Empire, but engaged in little or no transoceanic trade. Others include the Mbunda, whose kingdom was established in the 15th century at the confluence of Kwilu and Kasai rivers, in the south of present-day Democratic Republic of the Congo, after a misunderstanding in Ngola, also known as the origin of the Lunda and the Luba kingdoms. The Mbunda trace their origin from Sudan, trekking southwards through Ngola where they came in contact with the Luba and Rwanda kingdoms. They reached what is now Angola in the 16th century, where they encountered the Khoisan, Bushmen and other groups considerably less technologically advanced than themselves, whom they easily dominated with their superior knowledge of metal working, ceramics and agriculture. The Mbunda Kingdom in Mbundaland, southeast of the now Angola, endured until late 19th century, one of the oldest and biggest ethnic grouping in southern Africa. Portuguese colonization. The geographical areas now designated as Angola entered into contact with the Portuguese in the late 15th century, concretely in 1483, when Portugal established relations with the Congo state, which stretched from modern Gabon in the north to the Kwanza River in the south. In this context, The Portuguese established a small trade post at the port of Mbunda, in Soyo. The Portuguese explorer Paulo Dias de Neve founded Luanda in 1575 as São Paulo de Luanda, with 100 families of settlers and 400 soldiers. ʁɛʻpublikhodh, a Portuguese fort from 1587 which became a town in 1617, was another important early settlement they founded and ruled. The Portuguese would establish several settlements, forts and trading posts along the coastal strip of current-day Angola, which relied on the slave trade, commerce in raw materials, and the exchange of goods for survival. The Atlantic slave trade provided a large number of black slaves to merchants and to slave dealers in Angola. European traders would export manufactured goods to the coast of Africa where they would be exchanged for slaves. Within the Portuguese Empire, most black African slaves were traded to Portuguese merchants who bought them to sell as cheap labor for use on Brazilian agricultural plantations. This trade would last until the first half of the 19th century. According to John Oliffe, Portuguese records of Angola from the 16th century show that a great famine occurred on average every 70 years. Accompanied by epidemic disease, it might kill one-third or one-half of the population, destroying the demographic growth of a generation and forcing colonists back into the river valleys. The Portuguese gradually took control of the coastal strip during the 16th century by a series of treaties and wars, forming the Portuguese colony of Angola. Taking advantage of the Portuguese Restoration War, the Dutch occupied Luanda from 1641 to 1648, where they allied with local peoples, consolidating their colonial rule against the remaining Portuguese resistance. In 1648, a fleet under the command of Salvador de Zari took Luanda for Portugal and initiated a conquest of the lost territories, which restored Portugal to its former possessions by 1650. Treaties regulated relations with Congo in 1649 and Njinga's Kingdom of Matamba and Ndongo in 1656. The conquest of Pungo and Ndongo in 1671 was the last major Portuguese expansion from Luanda outwards, as attempts to invade Congo in 1670 and Matamba in 1681 failed. Portugal also expanded its territory behind the colony of ʁɛʻpublikhodh to some extent, but until the 19th century the inroads from Luanda and ʁɛʻpublikhodh were very limited, and Portugal had neither the intention nor the means to carry out a large-scale territorial occupation and colonization. The process resulted in few gains until the 1880s. Development of the hinterland began after the Berlin Conference in 1885 fixed the colony's borders, and British and Portuguese investment fostered mining, railways, and agriculture based on various forced labor systems. Full Portuguese administrative control of the hinterland did not establish itself until the beginning of the 20th century, after the Mbunda resistance and abduction of their king, Mbandu I Lyondthzi Kapova, eventually dislodged the Mbunda kingdom extending Angolan territory over Mbundaland. In 1951 the Portuguese government designated the colony as an overseas province of Portugal, called the Overseas Province of Angola. Portugal had a minimalist presence in Angola for nearly 500 years, and early calls for independence provoked little reaction amongst the population. More overtly political organizations first appeared in the 1950s and began to make organized demands for self-determination, especially in international forums such as the Non-Aligned Movement. The Portuguese regime, meanwhile, refused to accede to the demands for independence, provoking an armed conflict that started in 1961 when black guerrillas attacked both white and black civilians in cross-border operations in northeastern Angola. The war came to be known as the Colonial War. In this struggle, the principal protagonists included, the People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola, founded in 1956, the National Front for the Liberation of Angola, which appeared in 1961 and the National Union for the Total Independence of Angola, founded in 1966. After many years of conflict that led to the weakening of all the insurgent parties, Angola gained its independence on November 11, 1975, after the 1974 coup d'état in Lisbon, Portugal, which overthrew the Portuguese regime headed by Marcelo Caetano. Portugal's new revolutionary leaders began in 1974 a process of political change at home and accepted independence for its former colonies abroad. In Angola, a fight for dominance broke out immediately between the three nationalist movements. The events prompted a mass exodus of Portuguese citizens, creating up to 300,000 destitute Portuguese refugees the retornados. The new Portuguese government tried to mediate an understanding between the three competing movements, and succeeded in agreeing, on paper, in forming a common government. But in the end none of the African parties respected the commitments made, and military force resolved the issue. Independence and Civil War. After independence in November 1975, Angola faced a devastating civil war which lasted several decades and claimed millions of lives and produced many refugees. Following negotiations held in Portugal, itself under severe social and political turmoil and uncertainty due to the April 1974 revolution, Angola's three main guerrilla groups agreed to establish a transitional government in January 1975. Within 2 months, however, the FNLA, MPLA and UNITA were fighting each other and the country was well on its way to being divided into zones controlled by rival armed political groups. The superpowers were quickly drawn into the conflict, which became a flashpoint for the Cold War. The United States, Zaire and South Africa supported the FNLA and UNITA. The Soviet Union and Cuba supported the MPLA. In the beginning of the Civil War, most of the 500,000 Portuguese that lived in Angola and accounted for the majority of the skilled work in the public administration, agriculture, industries and trade fled the country, leaving its once prosperous and growing economy to a state of bankruptcy. During most of this period, 1975–1990, the MPLA organized and maintained a socialist regime. Ceasefire with UNITA. On March 22, 2002, Jonas Savimbi, the leader of UNITA, was killed in combat with government troops. A ceasefire was reached by the two factions shortly afterwards. UNITA gave up its armed wing and assumed the role of major opposition party, although in the knowledge that in the present regime a legitimate democratic election was impossible. Although the political situation of the country began to stabilize, regular democratic processes were not established before the elections in Angola in 2008 and 2012 and the adoption of a new constitution of Angola in 2010, all of which strengthened the prevailing dominant party system. MPLA head officials continue, for example, to be given senior positions in top-level companies or other fields, although a few outstanding UNITA figures are given some shares in the economic as well as in the military share. Among Angola's major problems are a serious humanitarian crisis, the abundance of minefields, the continuation of the political, and to a much lesser degree, military activities in favor of the independence of the northern exclave of Cabinda, carried out in the context of the protracted Cabinda conflict by the Front para a Libertação do Enclave de Cabinda, but most of all, the dilapidation of the country's rich mineral resources by the regime. While most of the internally displaced have now settled around the capital, in the so-called Masex, the general situation for Angolans remains desperate. Geography. At 481,321 square miles, Angola is the world's 23rd largest country. It is comparable in size to Mali, or 5 times the area of the United Kingdom. It lies mostly between latitudes 4° and 18°S, and longitudes 12° and 24°E. Angola is bordered by Namibia to the south, Zambia to the east, the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the northeast, and the South Atlantic Ocean to the west. The exclave of Cabinda also borders the Republic of the Congo to the north. Angola's capital, Luanda, lies on the Atlantic coast in the northwest of the country. Climate. Angola's average temperature on the coast is 60°C Fahrenheit in the winter and 70°C Fahrenheit in the summer. It has 2 seasons: dry season and hot rainy season. Politics. Angola's motto is Virtus Unita Fortior, a Latin phrase meaning virtue is stronger when united. The executive branch of the government is composed of the president, the vice presidents and the council of ministers. For decades, political power has been concentrated in the presidency. Governors of the 18 provinces are appointed by the president. The constitutional law of 1992 establishes the broad outlines of government structure and delineates the rights and duties of citizens. The legal system is based on Portuguese and customary law but is weak and fragmented, and courts operate in only 12 of more than 140 municipalities. A Supreme Court serves as the appellate tribunal. A constitutional court with powers of judicial review has not been constituted until 2010, despite statutory authorization. After the end of the Civil War, the regime came under pressure from within as well as from the international environment, to become more democratic and less authoritarian. Its reaction was to operate a number of changes without substantially changing its character. Angola is classified as not free by Freedom House in the Freedom in the World 2013 report. The report noted that the August 2012 parliamentary elections, in which the ruling Popular Movement for the Liberation of Angola won more than 70% of the vote, suffered from serious flaws, including outdated and inaccurate voter rolls. Voter turnout dropped from 80% in 2008 to 60%. Angola scored poorly on the 2008 Ibrahim Index of African Governance. It was ranked 44th from 48 sub-Saharan African countries, scoring particularly badly in the areas of participation and human rights, sustainable economic opportunity and human development. The Ibrahim Index uses a number of different variables to compile its list, which reflects the state of governance in Africa. The new constitution, adopted in 2010, further sharpened the authoritarian character of the regime. In the future, there will be no presidential elections. The president and the vice president of the political party which comes out strongest in the parliamentary elections become automatically president and vice president of Angola. Through a variety of mechanisms, the state president controls all the other organs of the state, so that the principle of the division of power is not maintained. As a consequence, Angola has no longer a presidential system, in the sense of the systems existing for example in the USA or in France. In terms of the classifications used in constitutional law, its regime is considered one of several authoritarian regimes in Africa. Military. The Angolan Armed Forces is headed by a Chief of Staff who reports to the Minister of Defense. There are 3 divisions: the Army, Navy, and National Air Force. Total manpower is about 110,000. Its equipment includes Russian-manufactured fighters, bombers, and transport planes. There are also Brazilian-made AIM-312 Tucano for training role, Czech-made L-39 for training and bombing role, Czech Zlin for training role, and a variety of Western-made aircraft such as C-212-Aviocar, Sud Aviation Alouette 3, etc. A small number of AAF personnel are stationed in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the Republic of the Congo. Police. The national police departments are public order, criminal investigation, traffic and transport, investigation and inspection of economic activities, taxation and frontier supervision, riot police and the rapid intervention police. The national police are in the process of standing up an air wing, which will provide helicopter support for operations. The national police are developing their criminal investigation and forensic capabilities. The force has an estimated 6,000 patrol officers, 2,500 taxation and frontier supervision officers, 182 criminal investigators and 100 financial crimes detectives and around 90 economic activity inspectors. The national police have implemented a modernization and development plan to increase the capabilities and efficiency of the total force. In addition to administrative reorganization, modernization projects include procurement of new vehicles, aircraft and equipment, construction of new police stations and forensic laboratories, restructured training programs and the replacement of AKM rifles with 9mm Uzis for officers in urban areas. Administrative divisions. Angola is divided into 18 provinces and 163 municipalities. The municipalities are further divided into 475 communes. The provinces are, exclave of Cabinda, with an area of approximately 7,283 square kilometers. The northern Angolan province of Cabinda is unusual in being separated from the rest of the country by a strip, some 60 kilometers wide, of the Democratic Republic of Congo along the lower Congo River. Cabinda borders the Congo Republic to the north and north-northeast and the DRC to the east and south. The town of Cabinda is the chief population center. According to a 1995 census, Cabinda had an estimated population of 600,000, approximately 400,000 of whom live in neighboring countries. Population estimates are, however, highly unreliable. Consisting largely of tropical forest, Cabinda produces hardwoods, coffee, cocoa, crude rubber and palm oil. The product for which it is best known, however, is its oil, which has given it the nickname, the Kuwait of Africa. Cabinda's petroleum production from its considerable offshore reserves now accounts for more than half of Angola's output. Most of the oil along its coast was discovered under Portuguese rule by the Cabinda Gulf Oil Company from 1968 onwards. Ever since Portugal handed over sovereignty of its former overseas province of Angola to the local independence groups, the territory of Cabinda has been a focus of separatist guerrilla actions opposing the government of Angola and Cabindan separatists. The Front for the Liberation of the Enclave of Cabinda Armed Forces of Cabinda announced a virtual Federal Republic of Cabinda under the presidency of Nzito Enriquez Tiago. One of the characteristics of the Cabindan independence movement is its constant fragmentation, into smaller and smaller factions. Economy. Angola's financial system is maintained by the National Bank of Angola and managed by Governor José de Lima Massano. Angola has a rich subsoil heritage, from diamonds, oil, gold, copper, and a rich wildlife, forest, and fossils. Since independence, oil and diamonds have been the most important economic resource. Smallholder and plantation agriculture have dramatically dropped because of the Angolan Civil War, but have begun to recover after 2002. The transformation industry that had come into existence in the late colonial period collapsed at independence, because of the exodus of most of the ethnic Portuguese population, but has begun to re-emerge, partly because of the influx of new Portuguese entrepreneurs. Similar developments can be verified in the service sector. Overall, Angola's economy has undergone a period of transformation in recent years, moving from the disarray caused by a quarter-century of civil war to being the fastest-growing economy in Africa and one of the fastest in the world, with an average GDP growth of 20% between 2005 and 2007. In the period 2001–2010, Angola had the world's highest annual average GDP growth, at 11.1%. In 2004, China's Exim Bank approved a $2 billion line of credit to Angola. The loan is being used to rebuild Angola's infrastructure, and has also limited the influence of the International Monetary Fund in the country. China is Angola's biggest trade partner and export destination as well as the fourth largest importer. Bilateral trade reached $27.67 billion in 2011, up 11.5% year-on-year. China's imports, mainly crude oil and diamonds, increased 9.1% to $24.89 billion while China's exports, including mechanical and electrical products, machinery parts and construction materials, surged 38.8%. The overabundance of oil led to a local unleaded gasoline price tag of 37 pennies per gallon. The Economist reported in 2008 that diamonds and oil make up 60% of Angola's economy, almost all of the country's revenue, and are its dominant exports. Growth is almost entirely driven by rising oil production, which surpassed 1.4 million barrels per day in late 2005 and was expected to grow to 2 million barrels per day by 2007. Control of the oil industry is consolidated in Sonangol Group, a conglomerate which is owned by the Angolan government. In December 2006, Angola was admitted as a member of OPEC. However, operations in diamond mines include partnerships between state-run Ndiama and mining companies such as Alrosa, which continue operations in Angola. The economy grew 18% in 2005, 26% in 2006 and 17.6% in 2007. However, due to the global recession, the economy contracted an estimated 0.3% in 2009. The security brought about by the 2002 peace settlement has led to the resettlement of 4 million displaced persons, thus resulting in large-scale increases in agriculture production. Although the country's economy has developed significantly since achieving political stability in 2002, mainly thanks to the fast-rising earnings of the oil sector, Angola faces huge social and economic problems. These are in part a result of the almost continual state of conflict from 1961 onwards, although the highest level of destruction and socio-economic damage took place after the 1975 independence, during the long years of civil war. However, high poverty rates and blatant social inequality are chiefly the outcome of a combination of a persistent political authoritarianism, of neo-patrimonial practices at all levels of the political, administrative, military, and economic apparatuses, and of a pervasive corruption. The main beneficiary of this situation is a social segment constituted since 1975, but mainly during the last decades, around the political, administrative, economic, and military power holders, which has accumulated enormous wealth. Secondary beneficiaries are the middle strata, which are about to become social classes. However, overall almost half the population has to be considered as poor, but in this respect there are dramatic differences between the countryside and the cities. An inquiry carried out in 2008 by the Angolan Instituto Nacional de Estatística has it that in the rural areas roughly 58% must be classified as poor, according to UN norms, but in the urban areas only 19%, while the overall rate is 37%. In the cities, a majority of families, well beyond those officially classified as poor, have to adopt a variety of survival strategies. At the same time, in urban areas social inequality is most evident, and assumes extreme forms in the capital, Luanda. In the Human Development Index, Angola constantly ranks in the bottom group. According to the Heritage Foundation, a conservative American think tank, oil production from Angola has increased so significantly that Angola now is China's biggest supplier of oil. Growing oil revenues have also created opportunities for corruption. According to a recent Human Rights Watch report, $32 billion disappeared from government accounts from 2007 to 2010. Before independence in 1975, Angola was a breadbasket of southern Africa and a major exporter of bananas, coffee and sisal, but 3 decades of civil war destroyed the fertile countryside, leaving it littered with landmines and driving millions into the cities. The country now depends on expensive food imports, mainly from South Africa and Portugal, while more than 90% of farming is done at family and subsistence level. Thousands of Angolan small-scale farmers are trapped in poverty. The enormous differences between the regions pose a serious structural problem in the Angolan economy. This is best illustrated by the fact that about 1/3 of the economic activities is concentrated in Luanda and the neighboring Bengo province, while several areas of the interior are characterized by stagnation and even regression. One of the economic consequences of the social and regional disparities is a sharp increase in Angolan private investments abroad. The small fringe of Angolan society where most of the accumulation takes place seeks to spread its assets, for reasons of security and profit. For the time being, the biggest share of these investments is concentrated in Portugal, where the Angolan presence in banks as well as in the domains of energy, telecommunications, and mass media has become notable, as has the acquisition of vineyards and orchards as well as of touristic enterprises. Transport. Transport in Angola consists of 3 separate railway systems totaling 2,761 km, 76,626 km of highway, of which 19,156 km is paved, 1,295 navigable inland waterways, 8 major seaports, 243 airports, of which 32 are paved. Travel on highways outside of towns and cities in Angola is often not best advised for those without 4x4 vehicles. While a reasonable road infrastructure has existed within Angola, time and the war have taken their toll on the road surfaces, leaving many severely potholed, littered with broken asphalt. In many areas drivers have established alternate tracks to avoid the worst parts of the surface, although careful attention must be paid to the presence or absence of landmine warning markers by the side of the road. the Angolan government has contracted the restoration of many of the country's roads. The road between Lubungo and Namibia, for example, was completed recently with funding from the European Union, and is comparable to many European main routes. Progress to complete the road infrastructure is likely to take some decades, but substantial efforts are already being made in the right directions. Demographics. Angola's population is estimated to be 18,056,072. It is composed of Mbundu 37%, Mbundu 25%, Congo 13%, and 32% other ethnic groups, as well as about 2% Mestier sectionaux, 1.4% Chinese and 1% European. The Mbundu and Mbundu nations combined form a majority of the population, at 62%. The population is forecast to grow to over 47 million people to 2060, nearly tripling the estimated 16 to 18 million in 2011. The last official census was taken in 1970, and showed the total population as being 5.6 million. The first post-independence census is to be held in 2014. It is estimated that Angola was host to 12,100 refugees and 2,900 asylum seekers by the end of 2007 November. 400 of those refugees were originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo, who arrived in the 1970s. As of 2008 there were an estimated 400,000 Democratic Republic of the Congo migrant workers, at least 30,000 Portuguese, and about 259,000 Chinese living in Angola. Since 2003, more than 400,000 Congolese migrants have been expelled from Angola. Prior to independence in 1975, Angola had a community of approximately 350,000 Portuguese. Currently, there are about 200,000 who are registered with the consulates, and increasing due to the debt crisis in Portugal. The Chinese population stands at 258,920, mostly composed of temporary migrants. The total fertility rate of Angola is 5.54 children born per woman, the 11th highest in the world. Languages. The languages in Angola are those originally spoken by the different ethnic groups in Portuguese, introduced during the Portuguese colonial era. The indigenous languages with the largest usage are Umbundu, Kimbundu, and Kikongo, in that order. Portuguese is the official language of the country. Mastery of the official language is probably more extended in Angola than it is elsewhere in Africa, and this certainly applies to its use in everyday life. Moreover, and above all, the proportion of native speakers of the language of the former colonizer, turned official after independence, is no doubt considerably higher than in any other African country. There are three intertwined historical reasons for this situation. In the Portuguese bridgeheads Luanda and Ngola, which existed on the coast of what today is Angola since the 15th and 16th century, respectively, Portuguese was spoken not only by the Portuguese and their Mestier sectionaux descendants, but especially in and around Luanda by a significant number of Africans, although these always remained native speakers of their local African language. Since the Portuguese conquest of the present territory of Angola, and especially since its effective occupation in the mid-1920s, schooling in Portuguese was slowly developed by the colonial state as well as by Catholic and Protestant missions. The rhythm of this expansion was considerably accelerated during the late colonial period, 1961–1974, so that by the end of the colonial period children all over the territory had at least some access to the Portuguese language. In the same late colonial period, the legal discrimination of the black population was abolished, and the state apparatus in fields like health, education, social work, and rural development was enlarged. This entailed a significant increase in jobs for Africans, under the condition that they spoke Portuguese. As a consequence of all this, the African lower middle class which at that stage formed in Luanda and other cities began to often prevent their children from learning the local African language, in order to guarantee that they learned Portuguese as their native language. At the same time, the white and Mestier section population, where some knowledge of African languages could previously often been found, neglected this aspect more and more, to the point of frequently ignoring it totally. After independence, these tendencies continued, and were even strengthened, under the rule of the MPLA, which has its main social roots exactly in those social segments where the mastery of Portuguese as well as the proportion of native Portuguese speakers was highest. This became a political side issue, as FNLA and UNITA, given their regional constituencies, came out in favor of a greater attention to the African languages, and as the FNLA favored French over Portuguese. The dynamics of the language situation, as described above, were additionally fostered by the massive migrations triggered by the Civil War. Mbundu, the most populous ethnic group and the most affected by the war, appeared in great numbers in urban areas outside their areas, especially in Luanda and surroundings. At the same time, a majority of the Bay Congo who had fled to the Democratic Republic of Congo in the early 1960s, or of their children and grandchildren, returned to Angola, but mostly did not settle in their original habitat, but in the city Isaguro, and again above all in Luanda. As a consequence, more than half the population is now living in the cities which, from the linguistic point of view, have become highly heterogeneous. This means, of course, that Portuguese as the overall language of communication is by now of paramount importance, and that the role of the African languages is steadily decreasing among the urban population, a trend which is beginning to spread into rural areas as well. The exact numbers of those fluent in Portuguese or who speak Portuguese as a first language are unknown, although a census is expected to be carried out in July-August 2013. Quite a number of voices demand the recognition of Angolan Portuguese as a specific variant, comparable to those spoken in Portugal or in Brazil. However, while there exists a certain number of idiomatic particularities in everyday Portuguese, as spoken by Angolans, it remains to be seen whether or not the Angolan government comes to the conclusion that these particularities constitute a configuration that justifies the claim to be a new language variant. Religion. There are about 1,000 mostly Christian religious communities in Angola. While reliable statistics are non-existent, estimates have it that more than half of the population are Catholics, while about a quarter adhere to the Protestant churches introduced during the colonial period, the Congregationalists mainly among the Umbundu of the Central Highlands and the coastal region to its west, the Methodists concentrating on the Kimbundu-speaking strip from Luanda to Mjinji, the Baptists almost exclusively among the Bay Congo of the northwest and dispersed Adventists, Reformed and Lutherans. In Luanda and region there subsists a nucleus of the syncretic Dacusts, and in the northwest a sprinkling of Kambangism can be found, spreading from the Congo Zaire. Since independence, hundreds of Pentecostal and similar communities have sprung up in the cities, where by now about 50% of the population is living. Several of these communities' churches are of Brazilian origin. The U.S. Department of State estimates the Muslim population at 80,000 to 90,000, while the Islamic community of Angola puts the figure closer to 500,000. Muslims consist largely of migrants from West Africa and the Middle East, although some are local converts. The Angolan government does not legally recognize any Muslim organizations and often shuts down mosques or prevents their construction. In a study assessing nations' levels of religious regulation and persecution with scores ranging from 0 to 10, where 0 represented low levels of regulation or persecution, Angola was scored 0.8 on government regulation of religion, 4.0 on social regulation of religion, 0 on government favoritism of religion and 0 on religious persecution. Foreign missionaries were very active prior to independence in 1975, although since the beginning of the anti-colonial fight in 1961 the Portuguese colonial authorities expelled a series of Protestant missionaries and closed mission stations based on the belief that the missionaries were inciting pro-independence sentiments. Missionaries have been able to return to the country since the early 1990s, although security conditions due to the Civil War have prevented them until 2002 from restoring many of their former inland mission stations. The Catholic Church and some major Protestant denominations mostly keep to themselves in contrast to the new churches, which actively proselytize. Catholics, as well as some major Protestant denominations, provide help for the poor in the form of crop seeds, farm animals, medical care and education. Largest cities, culture. In Angola, there is a culture ministry that is managed by Culture Minister Rosa Maria Martins da Cruz e Silva. Portugal has been present in Angola for 400 years, occupied the territory in the 19th and early 20th century, and ruled over it for about 50 years. As a consequence, both countries share cultural aspects, language and main religion. The substrate of Angolan culture is African, mostly Bantu, while Portuguese culture has been imported. The diverse ethnic communities are the of Mbundu, Mbundu, Kikongo, Chok, Mbunda and other peoples are maintain to varying degrees their own cultural traits, traditions and languages, but in the cities, where slightly more than half of the population now lives, a mixed culture has been emerging since colonial times in Luanda since its foundation in the 16th century. In this urban culture, the Portuguese heritage has become more and more dominant. An African influence is evident in music and dance, and is molding the way in which Portuguese is spoken, but is almost disappearing from the vocabulary. This process is well reflected in contemporary Angolan literature, especially in the works of Peptela and Ana Paula Ribeiro Tavares. Leila Lopes, Miss Angola 2011, was crowned Miss Universe 2011 in Brazil on September 12, 2011, making her the first Angolan to win the pageant. Health. Epidemics of cholera, malaria, rabies and African hemorrhagic fevers like Marburg hemorrhagic fever, are common diseases in several parts of the country. Many regions in this country have high incidence rates of tuberculosis and high HIV prevalence rates. Dengue, filariasis, leishmaniasis, and onchocerciasis are other diseases carried by insects that also occur in the region. Angola has one of the highest infant mortality rates in the world and one of the world's lowest life expectancies. A 2007 survey concluded that low and deficient nicene status was common in Angola. Demographic and Health Surveys is currently conducting several surveys in Angola on malaria, domestic violence and more. Education. Although by law education in Angola is compulsory and free for 8 years, the government reports that a percentage of students are not attending due to a lack of school buildings and teachers. Students are often responsible for paying additional school-related expenses, including fees for books and supplies. In 1999, the gross primary enrollment rate was 74% and in 1998, the most recent year for which data are available, the net primary enrollment rate was 61%. Gross and net enrollment ratios are based on the number of students formally registered in primary school and therefore do not necessarily reflect actual school attendance. There continue to be significant disparities in enrollment between rural and urban areas. In 1995, 71.2% of children ages 7 to 14 years were attending school. It is reported that higher percentages of boys attend school than girls. During the Angolan Civil War, nearly half of all schools were reportedly looted and destroyed, leading to current problems with overcrowding. The Ministry of Education hired 20,000 new teachers in 2005 and continued to implement teacher trainings. Teachers tend to be underpaid, inadequately trained, and overworked. Some teachers may reportedly demand payment or bribes directly from their students. Other factors, such as the presence of landmines, lack of resources and identity papers, and poor health prevent children from regularly attending school. Although budgetary allocations for education were increased in 2004, the education system in Angola continues to be extremely underfunded. According to estimates by the UNESCO Institute for Statistics, the adult literacy rate in 2011 was 70.4%, 82.9% of males and 54.2% of women are literate as of 2001. Since independence from Portugal in 1975, a number of Angolan students continued to be admitted every year at high schools, polytechnical institutes, and universities in Portugal, Brazil and Cuba through bilateral agreements. In general, these students belong to the elites. Sports. Angola is the top basketball team of FIBA Africa, and a regular competitor at the Summer Olympic Games and the FIBA World Cup. The Angola national football team qualified for the 2006 FIFA World Cup, as this was their first appearance on the World Cup final stage. They were eliminated after 1 defeat and 2 draws in the group stage. They won 3 COSAFA Cups and finished runner-up in 2011 African Nations Championship. Angola has participated in the World Women's Handball Championship for several years. The country has also appeared in the Summer Olympics for 7 years and both compete and have hosted the first Roller Hockey World Cup. Angola is also often believed to have historic roots in the martial art capoeira Angola, and batuk, which were practiced by enslaved African Angolans transported as part of the Atlantic slave trade. See also: Outline of Angola, Index of Angola-related articles. References. Much of the material in this article comes from the CIA World Factbook 2000 and the 2003 U.S. Department of State website. The information given there is, however, corrected and updated on the basis of the other sources indicated. External links: Portuguese, official website, Angola entry at the World Factbook, Angola at DMOZ, Angola from UCB Libraries GovPubs. Angola profile from the BBC News. Wikimedia Atlas of Angola, key development forecasts for Angola from International Futures. National language Mbunda, the Mbunda Kingdom Research and Advisory Council, Student Pulse 2010 article on challenges facing Angola, Bertelsmann Transformation Index 2012 a Euro-Angola Country Report, Marcus Weimer, The Peace Dividend, Analysis of a Decade of Angolan Indicators, 2002 a Euro 2012.